welcome aboard to the show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Ari.
I want to jump into a difficult question, maybe even a little sensitive. Your role with the crisis line as a crisis line volunteer. Tell us that story. How did you get to that? What did the process look like? What did you get from it?
Sure. So, goodness, this was 2000. I was walking around the University of Colorado at Boulder's campus. I graduated from high school a year earlier in 1999. I'm dating myself already. And I was studying advertising in the School of Journalism. And I found myself also working at the local snowboard shop, going to 18-hour credits, a semester. And I was really ingrained in school and paying my way through school, right? But then I got to a point where I realized I needed more meaning in my life. And there was a flyer on campus that stopped me in my tracks. And that was a flyer that was essentially the Denver Metropolitan Crisis Line recruiting volunteers. And I thought, wow, now that's something that sounds like could be meaningful in my life and certainly give me the opportunity to make a difference in people's lives. So I pursued an interview with the Crisis Line, and sure enough, I was lucky enough to be chosen to volunteer at that Crisis Line 20 hours a week. I was at that time, that's when I was first bitten by the bug of learning and knowing the power of conversation and how.
Before we get to that,
Sure.
just to make this incredibly transparent, this is a suicide hotline. People are calling in with suicidal thoughts, some of the time possibly would act on it. What was the, let's say, the first real call that you had? What did that look like? What's going through your head as you're walking through this process?
Sure. So the calls, I would say, certainly there were individuals that were contemplating suicide, but there were also individuals in severe domestic violence situations, as well as challenges around sexual identity, as well as a variety of issues that really spanned across campus and the entire city of Denver, where individuals were in oftentimes many abusive situations. We actually had a lot of repeat callers, and we had a log where we tracked all of the callers that would call into the crisis line. So every time I would start a new shift, I had to study the log and really understand who called in. Obviously, these were all anonymous callers. One call that really stood out to me was an individual that said he was a collegiate athlete. And he was really challenged with his situation at home. He wanted to come out to his family, and he had a very religious family. And this was a situation that he felt like if he really approached his family with his true identity, then they would never speak to him again. And that was just one small example of the types of calls that we would get in. And we were taught to ask the right questions to actually get the callers to solve their own problems.
Was that scary to you? I mean, I'm assuming something like 19, 20, trying to help people on a journey that would be terrifying.
It was absolutely frightening at times. And I would say probably every other night leaving the crisis line, I didn't sleep very well. But what kept me going and kept me going back to the crisis line was knowing that I was making a difference in people's lives, and all through just a phone call, right? And they didn't know who I was. I was anonymous as well.
Right.
The power of connection between two humans who don't even frankly know each other. It became addictive to me, right? To know that, wow, I could dramatically change the trajectory of someone's life or save their life with one simple phone call.
Did you get a sense for the impact that you had on these people, or is it kind of disconnected, right? You have the call, they disappear, you don't know what happened.
We would actually receive messages and voicemails from repeat callers when
Mm,
they had a breakthrough, and they would call us thanking us for they usually typically know the day, time, exactly where they were when they had that phone call. And it was, obviously very much the juice that kept us going, right? So I would say that happened that more irregularly. That
mm,
wasn't a common
right.
occurrence, but from time to time we would get thank yous.
First of all, not an easy topic to talk about. I appreciate you sharing this with us. You were, before I crashed in with a line of questions, you were about to say how this changed you, what you learned from it.
So obviously, as you had shared, at the ripe age of 19, what did I know? Not much,
Yeah.
right? And I certainly, I grew up in a fairly privileged environment. I didn't have a lot of struggles. I was very lucky not to have struggles as a child. But I realized that at a young age that I was pretty good at connecting with people.
Mm,
And I think what I learned in that crisis line was really oftentimes most people know how to solve their own problems,
mm,
but it's up to someone to ask the right questions. And knowing where and when and how to ask the right questions is frankly leadership 101, right? And so I will say that obviously learning the art of communication, which really does stem through asking the right questions, was the perfect catalyst to launch a successful career in executive search, because that's frankly what executive recruiters do for a living. They have to know the questions to ask, how to probe and vet talent through really unlocking the knowledge and information among an executive. And you can't do that without asking the right questions.
Did you have a sense of, and I'm maybe committing a sin here of oversimplification, but did you get a sense from your experience at the crisis line, and then 20 hours a week is a lot for a volunteer activity, that there are some people that are caught in this victimization mindset and the world is the world and they have no power to change it and it's not them who needs to change versus I have the power to change. Is that a paradigm you experienced at all?
Absolutely. So I'm sure you're familiar with operating above and or below the line. So the concept, I think, of operating above the line is not a woe is me. It's the world is not happening to me. You believe that you have more control over your destiny and the outcomes, right, in your life than operating below the line, which is very much more of a victim mentality, and that the world is happening to me. So I would say, most high performing executives, they don't get to that level of leadership and learning how to empower others, which is the best kind of leadership, without learning how to operate above the line.
Was there correlation to any degree that you could notice between people who are operating above the line, who are not suffering from this victimism philosophy, um, and then having these moments of eureka, of this is, I now know where I'm going and what I'm doing, and I'm no longer having suicidal or or other issues in my life because I took control. Did that, in your kind of limited view, did that correlate?
Yeah, somewhat. I would say just because someone builds a tremendous career for themselves, it doesn't mean that they don't battle depression from time to time.
Mm, mm,
And obviously, there are some really intelligent people that oftentimes do tend to suffer from depression, right?
right.
These are people who can think deeply about the world, about their lives. And so, I don't know if I would say there's a direct correlation. I think, if anything, many of these high powered executives are able to operate at a level of intensity where they don't always have time to even think about life and pause
Mm,
um, and do that internal work oftentimes.
mm.
So,
So there's a saying that I have that self-awareness is a gift and it's the best superpower that a person can have, but it's also, if you are lucky enough to have no self-awareness, then ignorance is bliss. And I warn people who go down this path of self-awareness that is incredibly excruciatingly painful, because I remember 18-year-old me, and the joys of just believing that you were right and that you were awesome, and the 40-something-year-old me who sees the both sides of everything. It's excruciating, it's complicated, there's no simplicity in life, and finding joy in that is absolutely possible, but it's more difficult and it's more complicated. So there's a thin line there that I'm not exactly sure what the right answer is. I appreciate you sharing your perspective.
Absolutely. I would say I actually embrace challenges and struggles. I've had struggles as an adult now. 44 years under my belt. We're all about to, it's almost impossible to get to middle age without some struggles, right? And I would say every time I have a challenge or struggle, I try to stop myself and ask myself, what's the line of learning? There's always a line of learning. And oftentimes there's even greater lines of learning in a missed challenge than there are the good times and the wins. So I've tried to flip the script. And when I'm faced with a challenge, I try to take it as a gift, because I know there'll be a even stronger line of learning.
I have a selfish question here.
Sure.
How do you teach that philosophy to your almost 11-year-old? It's incredibly difficult, because we say the things, right, that, every failure is an opportunity to learn, but I'm finding that it's harder for it to click.
Yes. And, obviously you had shared that you, similar to myself at 18 years old, you thought, the world was your oyster and you knew it all. Right. So I think that's probably just a rite of passage where you have to, all of our kids have to learn oftentimes the hard way. Right. And, learn on their own. But I would say, I just try to be mindful, and going back to our theme of asking the right questions.
Yeah.
So when she makes a mistake or an error, and there's a tough lesson to be had, I ask the question of, what did you learn? What would you have done differently if you had the opportunity to do it all over again?
Yeah.
And we should be asking ourselves those questions at, frankly, any age, right?
Yeah. He failed this, not failed, but he didn't get a good grade in this test. And I was like, okay, would you have done anything differently? Like, did you study? Were you focused? Did you sleep enough the night before? Went down this long line of kind of interrogation, and I couldn't find one fault in his process. Everything he did well. He just got unlucky. I came to the conclusion after interrogating him for 10 minutes that he just got unlucky. I said to him, you know what? Such is life. Sometimes you get unlucky, and you should not feel an ounce of regret for doing poorly if everything about your process was right. So
100%.
it's fine. You'll do better next time. Like, don't worry about it. Everything in your process is correct. So all the decisions you made were correct. You just had bad luck. That's all. So, just keep on going. So
Well, I think words of wisdom, Dad. And I think is my philosophy is it's all about work ethic at the end of the day. So as long as they put in their best effort, that's all.
I deeply agree with that. It's just so at that young age and even older, it's so easily to be attached to your failures and have your failures reflect something about who you are, as opposed to, be a learning lesson. So it's not quite sure how to teach my son that yet, but it's a journey we're going on together.
That's right. Hey, sometimes the most interesting parts of us are the broken parts.
This is fair. This is very fair. Oh my God, this is dangerous, because you're going down a path which would be very long and deep. This is the art of going down the rabbit hole. So I need to think if I want to go down that path. So what's the most beautiful broken that you have seen that you enjoy?
Oh goodness. So I have a statue in my office. I'm looking at
Mm.
her right now, and she has one arm. And I got this piece of art. It's a sculpture. I wish I could show it to you. And I got this piece of art because I wanted to be reminded every single day that the true beauty really does come from our brokenness, right?
Mm.
And it's our brokenness that connects us as humans, right? So how many times have you been at a cocktail party or any kind of social setting, and it's just small talk after small talk, right?
Yeah.
Nothing pains me more than small talk. And I'm sure, given what you do for a living, you
Thank
can
you for
relate,
saying that.
right? And so where and when I find myself connecting the most with others is when they're vulnerable
Yeah.
and they share their authentic self. And typically that's through the challenges that they've had and the struggles that they've had.
Mm.
And that's what makes me feel close to another human,
Yeah.
right? So I think, when I think about the brokenness, it's gives us an opportunity to be able to share our story of struggles with others. And that drives really meaningful, deep, connected relationships. And I always say at the end of our lives, what do we have? We have two things. We have our relationships and our memories.
Yeah.
And it's goes back to being able to build those relationships does tend to come from those broken parts.
Yeah. I You mentioned that, the 11-year-old, and the 18-year-olds, they learn through the hard paths ultimately. That's not true necessarily. There's plenty of 40-year-olds, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, that never find the way to be more than that. And the reason that I went back to that point is I see these 40, 50-year-olds that their whole circle of friend is basically vanity, right? It's you go on these flashy trips together. You've never had a shared experience of suffering, um, and those people will not be there for you when something truly goes wrong. Um, so it does scare me that you know some people don't learn that lesson. So I'm a little hesitant to think that, oh yeah, my kids will figure it out on their own, because I see these adults that have the maturity of 16-year-olds basically. So
And do you
it's
blame social media for this, Ari?
look, you're in my generation, and because we're about the same age, and then the 50-year-olds of today's generation, they're 10 years older than us, almost 5, 6 years older than us, or maybe more. We didn't have social media, so how can you blame something that didn't exist? So no, I don't think social media is to blame. I think it's really easy to blame technology. But you and I and the 55-year-olds who are our managers, um, they grew up where you had to, like us, come and knock on the door in order to have time with a friend. And there was no mobile phones. You had to call a landline, and then you had to ask the mom or the dad to speak with the son or daughter, right? Like, that's the world we grew up. Yet many of us still became assholes ultimately. Sorry for my language. So no, I do not blame social media. I do guard my kids from social media, because I think it definitely has a dark side, right? There's way too much pedophilia and human trafficking, and a lot of it has deep involvement with stuff like TikTok. And sorry, not TikTok probably too, but the one I was going to say is Snapchat. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely not a safe thing, right? But you can pick up a hammer and smash somebody in the head, or you can pick up a hammer and build a house. So I feel like that about technology. But yeah, we were screwed up, and our big brothers were screwed up even without social media. So that's I think it's a resounding no from my perspective.
Yep, I'm with you. I told my daughter that when she's older and all of her friends are on social media, that I will pay her every month she is not on social media.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Ironically, and I didn't want to get into my daughter, but ironically, my daughter is doing incredibly well because of social media. But we talked a little bit about that before the show. So okay, I wanna transition. Um, you come away with this insight that words have meaning, that you can change people's lives with a sentence. and you lean into what I'm going to coin or call the Socratic method, right? It's the question-based approach. And you figure out that there's power in this. How does this connect to headhunting and HR and finding the right person?
Yeah, absolutely. So it does. We are hired to mitigate risk, right? And so organizations, when they come to search, they are basically saying we can't afford to make a mistake, right?
Right.
So it's up to us to vet the A players from the B players. And we're not hired to recruit the B players. We're hired to recruit the top 1%, right? Not even the top 10%. They're looking for the best of the best. So we essentially evaluate humans for a living, right? And how do you do that? By asking the right questions.
So I want to play the devil's advocate here, or the defender of truth, if we want to use the Catholic Church's terminology. Many of us, me and my wife, perceive the bad headhunters and such as going through a checklist, just seeing that whatever the employer said that they want, that they're getting it, just to cover their asses. So the employer says, yeah, this is what I wanted. And the interaction with the search firm, headhunter, whatever, is quite minimal, actually. And it feels like a checklist, and it's kind of awful. And then there is very little value in that process. And you see HR people like this too, not just the headhunters, and then managers who do this as well, go through the checklist. What's your philosophy? What's wrong with the world of hiring versus your philosophy on how to do it?
So, great question. So, we like to say there's a difference between recruiting and headhunting. So, what you're describing feels more like recruiting. That's very much what we say in the search business, a post and pray mentality. So they're posting jobs and
I
they're
love that.
praying, right, that the hire is in that batch. And in this day and age, especially in this existing market, we could post a job and 1,000 applicants will inundate our inboxes within 24 hours, right? So the difference between recruiting and headhunting is we are headhunters in executive search, right? And that means we're going after people who are not looking. We are not posting and praying. We are really very much consultants to the organizations we serve. And we are going pretty deep into the business, the thesis, what's the vision, where are we going? And then we're basically scoping out the roles, skill set, track record that organization needs to hire for in order to meet its vision and or end goals. And oftentimes we're focused on value creation because we want to exit the business in 3 to 5 years. We do a lot of work in private equity.
So if you have a core problem here of, is this person an A player versus a B player, or God forbid a C player? If you can figure that out for executive search, then that's an incredibly valuable problem to know how to figure out for any kind of search or hiring. So what's I don't know if you can tell us your secret sauce. What's the magic there? How do you do it?
The magic, I'm happy to share the magic because it's a lot of work. So the magic is how we mitigate risk is based on track record of success. One. And secondly, we like to take what we call take the car for a test drive. So one, in order to understand if an individual has the track record of success, we are doing behavioral interviews. We are looking for measurable results. We are ensuring that they weren't just in the right place at the right time. They were truly the brains and talent behind that organization's success. We are evaluating leadership skills. And, as we learn about, hey, they took this business from 30 million to 200 million in 6 years, right? We want to hear every step that got that organization there. And again, ensuring that they were the brains behind it, right?
How do you know that? How do you know the answer to that? Because they could be regurgitating the story that they intimately know because they were working with a bunch of A players that they got lucky to have. How do you really discriminate between that person was critical to the team, to building the team, to empowering the team, or were they just lying back and watching the success happen?
Yeah, I mean, an easy place to start, Ari, is did they build the team that made it happen,
Mm, mm,
right? And then really diving into, because this is a meaty topic that I could talk about for hours, but uh, it's did they build the team, and then what was their strategy behind who they hired, how they hired them, right? I'd say most executives don't make it to the C-suite because they don't have the playbook and a methodology to how they build high performing teams,
mm.
and then how they allow and unlock the talent within those teams to achieve ultimate success,
Okay.
right?
So coincidentally, of course, it's not coincidentally, I'm writing a book about this topic exactly. I want to dive into one of the most interesting topics, I think, is exactly this. How do you build that team, and then how do you empower them? Let's start from the horror stories.
Mhm.
What are the biggest mistakes that you've seen, experienced, where people either hire the wrong people or hire amazing people and then completely mismanage them?
So it's a great question. So oftentimes we see a ton of hiring mistakes, right?
Mm,
We actually are hired to do a lot of cleanup of hiring mistakes. I will say an easy uh, answer to your question that I see repeatedly is they've got a Harvard MBA. They had a Stanford MBA. They went to an Ivy League school, right? And it's an organization that's highly nimble. There's no playbook, right? It required scrappiness. It required the ability to be incredibly creative, and that doesn't always come from an Ivy League MBA, right? Who was studying finance, right? So we see a lot of hiring mistakes within organizations that tend to fall in love with the
mm,
resume, but
mm,
forget to actually vet the track record of success and their ability to build a plan and execute and roll up their sleeves to to get that plan accomplished, right? So sometimes they overhire, oftentimes overhire for uh, intellect
mm,
on paper, and oftentimes those folks are lacking experience
mm.
that the organization needs.
Here's one of the, I think, one of the travesties of the hiring process. You are, let's say, I've hired hundreds of developers, and interviewed thousands. One of the biggest pain points for me was that developers don't know how to write CVs. They're not marketing people. Their ability to articulate anything about themselves in a way which is not code is really poor. So I came to this understanding that CVs for some types of roles are kind of garbage.
Yeah.
It just provides no value whatsoever. So my hiring process, and I have literally, you know, interviewed thousands of developers. Um, I had a look at the resume for 5 parameters. We can talk about what those are. It's less interesting. And then I picked up a phone call and I had a 5-minute chat with hundreds of people.
Hmm.
Sometimes in many people in one day, right? As many 5 minutes that you can push in. How do you mitigate this challenge? If at all you agree with my problem statement, in a world where at least the perception is that these ATS systems are looking at resumes, they're filtering you out based on keywords. AI is doing some magic and kicking you out. There's 1,000 candidates in every role, what every role, but at least on average in 2023 December, there was 1,000 candidates on average for tech roles. It's ridiculous. And that's not even the hot hiring season, right? The hot hiring season would be May, April. So how do you solve for this problem if you agree with it?
Yes. So we're big on reference checks, as well as giving final project interviews, right? So again, taking the car for a test drive. Hey, here's a case study. Uh, Talk to us about how you would tackle this problem.
Mm,
And actually turning the interview into a work session
mm,
and getting a sense of what it would be like to work with the individual, and then backing that up with references. So, hey, okay, they did pretty well on this project interview, right? And now let's talk to some folks who've actually worked directly with the talent before, and can speak to what it's like to work with them, and what did they actually accomplish during their time together.
So I have heard a lot of criticism about reference checks. I am a big believer, big time. However, I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, you're calling somebody that they themselves said, like it's a friend, it's a whatever. The information is not going to be good or accurate." What would you say in response?
I'm a big fan of reference checks. Imagine if you're in the dating scene and you have the opportunity to speak to, your spouse's three ex-boyfriends, right?
Yeah.
Imagine the intel that you would receive,
love
right? We actually end up using it as an onboarding tool, right? We all have weaknesses.
Right.
And instead of spending 90 days to figure out the new hire's weakness, you could have it before their first day, right? And then you know how to lead and coach and develop them into the role.
For the executives who are hiring, who are doing the reference checks themselves, is there a magic to it? What advice can you give the muggles who are trying to figure out through a reference check and do it right? Because I would argue there's a lot of ways to do it wrong.
Absolutely. So I would say one of my favorite interview questions, reference questions, is to really try to uncover the weakness of the candidate. Which if you just flat out ask, well, what are their weaknesses? You're not going to get anything, right? Yeah. But if you ask, if you were to give them any advice in their career, anything that you really feel like would allow them to take their career to the next level, what might that be? That's how you get the weaknesses. And that is probably one of the most valuable pieces of our reference checks that we do.
I appreciate that. I'm in awe when I see companies that are just not doing reference checks. It's amazing to me. And I'll tell you that from my personal experience, I've never not done a reference check. And the amount of times where you call up the reference and it's horrible, the response that you get, right? Oh yeah, I was his or her manager, and yeah, you really can't work in a team. And then I think about the feedback saying that, oh, the person is going to give you somebody in the organization that loves them. And then I'm asking myself, well, if they couldn't even do that, like the only person that they gave this, I'm like, oh my Lord, like this is not a great signal. So yeah, I would recommend that every single executive either works with somebody like yourself. I try not to advertise, but since I think this is important, either works with somebody like yourself, or at least does it right, or at least does it at all. So I truly appreciate your perspective.
Absolutely. And the leadership assessments out there are tremendous. We work with a company called Hogan, and it spits out a 60-page leadership assessment. We end up learning more about the individual than we like to say their spouse probably even knows about them. And it has incredible insights, and it's actually also an incredible onboarding tool to drive self-awareness. To bring us back to the first part of our conversation together.
One last question. We are so way over time. This has been so much fun that we lost track of it. This is a difficult question because it's personal. If you had to go back to 20-something-year-old Camille, what advice would you give her?
I would tell her to believe in herself, to know that her kindness will take her farther in life than she ever thought possible, and to never stop being kind.
Camille, thank you so much for joining the show today. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Ari. Thank you for the time and the conversation.